In this video, I'm going to give you guys my impressions for Scarlet Nexus. This isn't a full review. We didn't have the game early enough to get all the way through before doing this review, but I have played around 15 to 20 hours or so I have a pretty good idea how the game plays. And in this video, I just kind of want to go over that and let you guys know what I like about the game, what I dislike, and whether it's worth your money or not. So the first thing I want to talk about is the things that I like about the game. Let's get into, the things I generally enjoy about it before I get into things I think aren't so good. So the first thing I want to talk about is the combat. The combat of the game is pretty goddamn solid. If you played the demo for the game, I think you probably know this already. One of the things about the demo, though, is that it's playing from a part in the middle of the game where you have like more characters and more abilities. So when you first start the game, you're not going to have as much of that, and it takes a little while to get up to that, sort of combat where you have more things you can do. So it starts off a little bit slower, but generally speaking, I think people will enjoy the combat mostly. It does get a little bit repetitive later in the game after you've done it over and over and over, but for the most part, I think people will be pretty happy with it. I do actually really enjoy the art style of the game. The graphics are not mind-blowing, but they are pretty good for the art style. And I like the anime feel of it. There's actually an anime series based on Scarlet Nexus that is premiering on July 1st, so that's not too far away. So if you like that, you may be interested in that anime as well. The music of the game is absolutely outstanding. Every time I keep thinking the music can't get any better, it gets better. There are more and more tracks, and they're all really well done, some with like solo guitars and just really, really good music that really sets the mood of the game, and I don't think they could have done a better job with the music. When it comes to the voice acting of the game, it's pretty good in Japanese, as you might expect. There's some familiar voice acting characters, but in English, it's average. Some of the characters are actually well done, and then some of them are really poor, so it kind of balances out to be, okay. I just feel like some characters were just done much better, or, a lot of times the voices don't seem to match the characters. But if you're playing in Japanese, then this won't be a problem for you. Another thing I really like about the game are there's sort of these companion episodes where you're kind of in your hub and you go out and hang out with your companions, learn more about them, and have dialogues. There is sort of like these, blooming romances that happen throughout the game without getting into too many spoilers, which is, typical anime fashion, the way that they're handled, and I really enjoyed that aspect. I do wish, that the voice acting was a little bit better in English, at least, during these episodes, because I think it would have made them better, but overall, I really enjoyed those episodes. Another thing I really enjoyed was the story. I feel like the story of the game is pretty solid. It's got some twists and turns. I don't want to go into spoilers or anything like that, but I think it's generally enjoyable. And sort of the way the game is designed is that you can play two protagonists that have similar stories that are different. They kind of come together at different points in the plot, and then diverge and kind of go their own direction and come back together again. So when you're playing the two different characters, you're going to see parts of the game or different parts of story that you didn't see when playing the other character. And I think that's an interesting take. My only concern there is that there's probably quite a bit of overlap on, things that you will see. I don't know how much of it is unique per character, but if I had to guess, I'd say about 50% of it or so, at least, is going to be different per character. Talking about the cons a bit, let's get into combat first. It does get a little bit repetitive after a while, and I feel like the biggest reason for this is that the game is not very challenging at all, even on hard. You just breeze through most mobs in most areas. The pacing of it is kind of like Devil May Cry. You're moving through a map. You get walled off. You have to fight a group of enemies that spawn in over and over. You defeat them, then the wall lifts and you move forward, and this repeats. So if you're familiar with how the Devil May Cry, at least Devil May Cry 5 works, it's very, very similar to that. It's just not hard. Except a certain fights where like you're in a very tight space and the camera angle is just, messing you up and you can't really see because you're like zoomed into your own asshole. That can be kind of hard. And there are certain, let's say, bosses that are very, very difficult. It's like, it doesn't seem, I don't know how anyone would ever do like a no-hit run, for example. They just hit you and you just kind of have to heal through it. But other than like some very specific fights, there's just almost no challenge to the game whatsoever. Another thing I feel like, contributes to the sort of monotony of combat is there isn't a lot of character progression. You do get upgraded weapons, but it's kind of like Final Fantasy where like you just get like an iron sword to a silver sword to a gold sword. And all that it does is just deals more damage. It doesn't really change anything other than your attack stat goes up. And that's true for your companions as well. You just get stronger weapons periodically, and there are not very many of them at all. You do get ability points to put into your brain tree that unlock certain moves and things. And this does help combat a little bit, but a lot of the stuff you get there is passive, and I don't feel like it's enough to make you feel like you have a build. You just kind of feel like you're a little bit stronger, and it doesn't really change the flow of combat too much. You also don't wear any armor, or you have slots kind of like Nier, where you can slot things that augment you. Like you have up to like 3 slots you can unlock. and you can change these around. They give you more health or more attack damage or whatever, but there's no like armor pieces or armor slots or, you know, stuff like that. So there's very, very little in the way of customization of your character. Another thing I found kind of dull is the actual levels, the areas of the game where you're like, you know, fighting through enemies, getting to bosses that sort of progress the story. They're very, very small. They're very linear, and they are not that well designed. I mean, they're not much to look at visually, even though I like the art style. They didn't do a whole lot with that art style in these levels, or I wish they'd done more. This is coming from Bandai Namco Studios, who also made Code Vein. I feel like that was one of the weaker parts of Code Vein, the level design, the fact they felt very bland. I feel like that translates over into this game. I feel like they have not gotten, you know, much better at that at all. And another thing is they reuse the same maps like 3 or 4 times. For instance, if you played the demo, that map that's in the demo or the maps that are in the demo, you'll play through those, depending if you do both characters or not, somewhere between 3 to 6 times each, which, considering how small they are, is just not particularly interesting. Moving away from combat, talking about the story and the characters and things like that without getting into spoilers. One of the things I really love about anime in general is the ability to convey emotion like so far over the top of what like live acting produces. You get to see emotion in anime that you just will never see in real life acting, and they didn't utilize that at all in this game. The animations for anime in this is more like a manga where they have sort of like these you know, stills, and there's very little actual animation to it at all. You'll see characters talking, and all that happens is their mouth moves and sometimes their eyes change. But for the most part, you're listening more than watching anything when you see the interactions happening. And you can actually just close your eyes for the most part and listen. And it kind of sucks. I mean, I wish it was actually fully animated. I actually am looking forward to the anime because I think it will be interesting, like fully animated. But this just kind of does it halfway, and I don't feel like that's a very good medium to translate a story. On top of that, besides the story being decent, and I'm actually interested in the story, the characters themselves are written very poorly. Their lines are written very poorly, and at least in English, I don't know what the actual, you know, Japanese is because you're obviously getting a translation. I just feel like they are written really, really one-dimensionally, most of them, and are, for the most part, uninteresting. Like, they could be really interesting, and there are moments in the game that were really great. It's not that it was all bad, but for the most part, I felt like they were cliche anime characters that weren't even done to cliche standards. Like, if they'd been cliche, I would probably have been happy, but they were not even as good as cliche anime, and so I kind of just didn't enjoy it as much as I thought it would. And this sort of brings me to the biggest problem that I have with Scarlet Nexus, which is the pacing of the game. You're actually watching or listening to these anime manga cutscenes more than you're actually playing the game. You will spend at least 50% of the time watching or listening to this stuff. And if it were better done, then this probably wouldn't be so much of an issue for me, but because it's kind of mediocre, it just really interrupts the pacing of the game. You're fighting your action, you know, for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it feels good, and then all of a sudden you're watching a cutscene for 20 minutes, and then you're fighting again for 10, 15 minutes, and then another cutscene for 10, 15 minutes. It just disrupts your rhythm. You feel like you're finally getting a hang of combat, getting into it, music's pumping, and then you're just sitting there with your control in your hand doing nothing. Because the game features no dialogue options, no side quests, nothing to really, you know, you have no decision making. So all you're doing is waiting for the cutscenes to play out before you move your character a bit, and then another cutscene plays. It almost feels like you're playing inside an anime that's, you know, again, only half animated, rather than playing a game. One of the things I felt about the demo was that the combat was outstanding. I was really looking forward to the game. And, you know, it had this sort of anime-ishness to it. And we didn't know during that demo how much anime would actually be in the game. But after playing it, I feel like their ratio's off. It almost feels like the game itself is just a big advertisement for their upcoming anime. And they're just trying to promote that. So, you know, as far as the game goes, it doesn't feel as much of a game as I'd want it to be. You're actually just playing sort of an interactive story with some combat here and there, and I wish it was more of a game. Obviously, I haven't finished the game yet, so we don't have like a proper review score for the different categories and to kind of let you guys know, but I would just say this to you. I highly caution you, if you enjoyed the demo, whether to buy this game. I don't think the demo is an accurate representation of the way the game feels completely. Obviously, the combat is very similar to the demo, so if you like the combat, you'll like the combat in the game. But I feel like the demo was mostly combat and a little bit of story, whereas the game itself is a ton of story and some combat. So Honestly, I don't know that this game is worth the price. If I had to go out and buy this retail, I would probably wait for a steep sale, or I might not even play it. That's where I'm at with it. It is sort of a chore to get through because I feel like you're just sitting there doing nothing a lot of the time, and if I wanted to do that, I would just watch anime. At least it would be animated. We are going to be streaming the game starting tomorrow, so if you guys want to see the game in action, ask questions about it, get a better idea, I urge you to do that. Come by and see the game, and then make your own decision about whether you want to buy it or not.